John, absolutely brilliant to see you here at QPR this afternoon. We're meeting up to talk about Terry Venables, who you knew well and obviously played under. Firstly, how saddened were you by his passing?
Funnily enough, I wasn't really sad. I mean, he's 80 years old, and I think, he's all of us do well to get to that age, and I wasn't really sad. I just I smiled, and whenever anybody ever mentioned Terry Venables' name to me over the years, or whatever, I saw a clip of him on TV, I would always smile because it just brings back happy memories. And when the news came through I was actually at Tottenham, believe it or not. I was actually at the Tottenham Villa match, and the news came through, and obviously saw it on the screens and that inside the stadium that he'd passed that day, and I still smiled, even though it was sad news. It was very sad news, and obviously as I get older myself, it happens quite a lot, that people that you knew in the game and so on. Bobby Charlton recently passed. I mean, that really hit me when Bobby Charlton passed, because when we all pretended to be Bobby Charlton when we were kids, So when the news come through about Terry at 80 years of age, I mean, he's had a wonderful life, had a fantastic life, and I was just sort of happy that I spent 3 seasons with him. As a player, as him being my coach and manager. And obviously many people he's touched many people in many ways over the years with just his presence, and when you're in the room with Terry Venables, he's very magnetic in that respect. Everybody wants to chat with him, and he was always brilliant, in a crowded room. It captured everybody's imagination and everybody's attention. With his storytelling and his singing, of course. So no, I've got nothing but, as I said, a happy face when I think of Terry, and he will continue to make me smile over the forthcoming years, I'm sure. There were very, very magical times working for him and under him, certainly here during my time at QPR.
We'll talk about that in a moment. What was your first memory of Terry Venables?
Well, obviously, I mean, I saw him as a player. I don't remember Chelsea so much. It was a little bit before my time, but I certainly remember him at Tottenham. And when he came across to QPR, and how he inspired the team that he played for when he was at QPR in the early days. A very, very good footballer. At Rangers, very smart, very clever, and I came across him as manager of Palace for when I was playing for Aston Villa, and we drew Crystal Palace in the League Cup. They would have been a championship team, Palace, in those days, and he was building the club, as you know. They were going to be the team of the 80s and that, and they were a good team, and they were a tough team to play against. Big Jim Cannon, the centre half. You didn't mess with him. Peter Nicholas, Welsh midfield player. Vince Hilaire, of course, in their team. Billy Gilbert. John Burridge, of course, was the goalkeeper there at the time at Palace. And they were a good team. And he built a very, very, very good team at Crystal Palace. And before, obviously, he made the move across here to Queen's Park Rangers. But no, I mean, I knew of him, and word had travelled, about his coaching. You come across people, obviously nothing like it is today, the contact that you would have, but you would play against opposition, and I knew somebody on the opposition, and he'd say, "Oh, have you seen so-and-so? So-and-so was talking about Venables, what a great coach he is," and words were sort of getting round about his coaching ability and his training sessions and just how good this guy was, and obviously Palace were doing really well under Terry. So that was really, it wasn't a secret that this guy Venables was a bit good at coaching, and a lot of the people that had played for him or worked under him were spreading the word around just how good he was.
You might have just answered my next question, but in 1981, you left Brighton in the top flight to join QPR in the second tier.
Yeah.
You were 27 at the time, and it was a team managed by Terry Venables. Mm-hmm. Is that the reason why? Because of his growing reputation?
Well, I'll tell you one of the reasons why. I turned him down. I turned him down about 6 months before that. I was at Brighton. Terry took over here at QPR as manager, I think in about the October or November of 1980. And I was going to be his first signing. And I had permission to speak with him, and I was at Brighton. I just moved down there about 18 months before, and me and my wife had just bought a house in Brighton. We just moved down from Birmingham, and we bought a house in Brighton. My children, I had a boy and a girl at the time, were both in school. My little and my boy had just started sort of morning school, nursery school or something. We lived in a lovely house. We got some lovely new neighbours, and we were so happy. And the football was going well. Brighton was a really, really good club. Not quite as good as they are today, but it was a good club. And we were really, really happy. And Terry came in for me. I was going to be his first signing, and I met him at Reigate. We decided to meet at Reigate. I think we obviously must have phoned each other or whatever. And we decided to meet at Reigate, which was about halfway. And he turned up in a Rolls Royce. And the Rolls Royce belonged to Jim Gregory, the chairman. And Jim had said to Terry, take my roller. He said, because that'll impress him. If he sees you turning up in a Rolls Royce, he said, that'll impress him. He said he want to sign straight away. So Terry admitted that it wasn't actually his. He said it was the chairman. And he told me the story. He said, no, the chairman had told me to take it. He said, that'll impress JG. So when we met, we talked about various things. We talked about money and all that, this, that, and the other. And obviously I was going to get a pay increase, and it was going to be worth a few quid to me. But we just settled into this new house and sort of new lifestyle and everything. And I was really, really happy. And anyway, we talked it over, and I decided that I wasn't going to go. I was going to stay. So I had to tell him that I was going to stay at Brighton, which I did.
What was his reaction?
I don't know really. He didn't really show me or tell me or say to me. It was kind of okay. That was it. Phone down. And then within a few days, he signed Simon Stainrod, and it was the same sort of transfer fee. I think it was about 300 grand or something, and that they were going to pay for me. They ended up paying 300 grand, and I remember all the lads at Brighton all took the mickey out of me, saying, he won't come back for you now. He spent his money. He spent the 300 grand that he was going to pay on you. He spent it on Simon, which of course was Simon Stainrod, and so he said that's that go. But our go-between was John Burridge, because me and Budgie were together at Villa. So I knew Budgie well. So I rang, a few weeks later, I rang Budgie and I said, I think I made a mistake. Because I kind of kept my eye on Rangers, and Rangers were under Terry, they were doing well. They were struggling near the foot of the table at that time, but he improved them, and he was slowly taking them up the table. And I think he'd added one or two more players since then. And I said to Budgie, I think I made a mistake. So I said, can you have a word with your gaffer, see if he'll come back, if we could get it done again? And he said, he come back a couple of days later and he just said, no, he said, Terry said, you've had your chance. Tough. End of. Move on. And I thought, I was gutted. I thought, shit. And things were starting to fall apart a little bit at Brighton. Alan Mullery was under a lot of pressure from the chairman, Mike Bamber. And I thought I'd blown it, Anyway, season finished. Budgie calls me again. And he said, I spoke to Terry today, or Terry spoke to me, and said he might come back in for you. Anyway, within a few weeks, the season finished and he come back for me. And in the summer, in the June of '81, I came up to Shepherd's Bush and signed a contract. So they were just laying the AstroTurf in the stadium. you've obviously had carpets fitted in your house and everything. You know what it's like. I walked out onto the pitch and there was bits of turf everywhere, rolled up here, there, and everywhere, and there was all these guys on the pitch all fitting the Omni turf as it was. So I had a really close-up look at it at that particular time, and obviously signed that summer with the plastic pitch and all. So it was a happy time for me. I was delighted to actually finally sign. Yeah.
So you had your first impressions of Terry from those meetings. What were your first and early impressions of him as a coach?
Well, obviously a reputation. He had already had a reputation that I'd heard about from many people, and I kind of was a bit susceptible. Surely he can't be that good. If he's that good, it'd be manager of Manchester United or whatever. But the more that you spoke to people, the more that there was something special about this guy, and I was now going to see it for myself, And just at the start of pre-season, normally at football clubs, you come back pre-season, you might not see a football for 4 weeks. Back in my day, you might not see a football for 4 weeks. It's just running, cross countries here, there, and everywhere. It was always about fitness at that time of the year, and I was expecting the same. But coming to QPR, you saw the football on the first day, which was kind of unheard of. But it was so refreshing, and everything really was connected with football. Yeah, we worked. We still did the cross countries, and we still did the hard work, which many players would do today. So. But generally, I think it was, you'd suddenly go out and under, I've said this to you before, Mozza, I know, but under other managers in the past, you would literally come out, the assistant manager would take you out on the training pitch, and you'd have to do 2 laps of the pitch, round the outside of the pitch, round the corner flags, you'd have to do 2 laps, that was your warm. Off you go then, 2 laps of the pitch, sent you on your way while he sort of stood there. And they'd send you around, and that would be your warm-up. Then you did a few stretches, and then you played 11v11. You kicked lumps out of each other, and that was it. And then you went in, had a wash, and went home. End of. And most days were like that. It wasn't really a coaching session as that. It was a training session, and you tended to be trained as opposed to be coached. I mean, there's a subtle difference between the two. And just under Terry, suddenly you come in and. Whereas before you might do an 8v8, in a 40x40 square, you'd play 8 against 8, keep ball, Terry would play 4 against 4, but he'd have little goals at the side of the pitch. At one end there'd be like a small goal, just about wide enough for a football to go in. And there'd be like on 2 corners, there'd be 2 little goals there for you to attack. And the opposition had 2 goals to attack as well. So you had to defend as well as attack. And suddenly there's a bit more to it than just an 8v8 in a 40x40. And then suddenly you'd change it and it'd have players on the outside. So whoever was in possession, you could use the people on the outside. So suddenly they had 2 extra men. You play a 6v6 with 4 on the outside. And suddenly you're now playing with these guys. So you've got a 2-man advantage when you're in possession of the football. So you had to look after it better, because if you weren't in possession, you had 2 men less, which was much more difficult.
And this was completely revolutionary.
This was revolutionary to me, yeah. We hadn't done this before with anybody, with any coach. He'd obviously sat and planned this out. And then suddenly, whilst you were doing that, he would designate, say, Alan Harris to suddenly take 4 players off. So 4 players went missing, and they went with Harry, and they went and did the running or whatever it was. And then you suddenly rotate, those 4 came back, and 4 more went out. And suddenly all these things were going on. And it was just so refreshing, so different. And then the next day, you'd come in and you'd do something completely different. And I've mentioned this to you before, Paul, but you'd suddenly do a session that you did 3 months ago, not the day before. Sometimes with coaches, you'll do a training session, and you'll do it the next day and the day after and the day after. By the end of the week, you're fed up with it, you know. But with Terry, suddenly you do something. Oh yeah, we did this 3 months ago. We haven't done it since. And he just rotated different training sessions all the time. Everything was always different. And as I've said before, when you come into the training ground in the morning, and I'd be driving in looking to see what's being put out on the training field. And Terry would be out there with his bollards and cones and setting up small goals and setting up the morning's training session. This is like half an hour before we're about to start. He'd be setting it all up, and you just drive in, starting to get excited again because you're seeing something new that's being put out again on the training field. And you'd come out and it was completely something different that you hadn't done before. And Terry would just introduce it into training. But it was all relative to the match or to the matches that were to come. It was all relative in that respect. It was all to do with football. It was all to do with the match at the weekend and all that kind of thing. And I just found that he improved you as a player. He made you think more. Whereas before, you know, the manager would tell you something and you didn't really use your own judgment to make decisions on the field. They were kind of made for you by the manager. He told you to do that, so you had to do that. When you get the ball, just smash it up the pitch, or stick it chuck it into the far post or whatever. But under Terry, he just taught you so much more. He made you think about the game more. And as I said, in the mornings, we had a blackboard and chalk. We hadn't quite got the equipment that they've got today, but we had a blackboard, like an old school blackboard, and Terry had a box of chalk, and we used to have to go in before training, start training at 10:30. At 10:15, we'd have a team meeting where he'd go in and he'd tell you what you're doing that particular morning, and he'd show you up on the board first, and it'd be like in square one. This is what we're doing first. We're doing this, that, and the other. And then we're going to move to this afterwards, and he'd be drawing it all out. And any questions, you know, and you'd say, "Oh, what's this? And he'd explain to you, this is what we're doing." And he's just trying to explain it in the broadest terms possible, so everybody understood it. And then it was right. Let's go and get started and get on with it. But it was all explained before we even sort of stepped out onto the pitch. And I'll just briefly tell you one more thing. If he's got 16 players. Now, I've been at clubs before where there's 16 players and 12 of you are working and the other 4 just stood around for some reason, you know, because the coach hasn't catered for 16 people. Terry catered for all 16. So if you were playing a 6v6, you've got 4 spares. He would make sure that the other 4 are joining in the actual session itself. Like I said to you before, they might actually be goals at the end of the pitch, the 4 players. So everybody was involved. In the middle of November, the last thing you want to be doing is stood around. So he would make sure that all 16 players are actually on the move doing something. And it was something that stayed with me as I got into coaching myself. So many things that I carried from Terry, tried to put my own mark on it, but so many things I learned from him in that respect.
And in terms of, before we go into your managerial side, in terms of you as a player, we could see what he did with QPR, the group, in terms of the success he had during that 3-year period. Yes. From winning the second division, getting to the FA Cup final, finishing 5th in the top flight, qualifying for the UEFA Cup. Yeah. What did he do specifically for you as an individual? You say you'd never been coached before. No. What did he do for you by coaching you in the way that no one else had before?
I never knew about rotation. I always thought it was to do with crops. Because they rotate the crops, don't they? But I kind of got it. And he sat down one day and he was teaching myself, Simon Stainrod, and Terry Fenwick in particular, us 3, about rotation, and Gary Waddock. Me and Waddock were the 2 midfield players. Me and Gary played alongside each other in midfield. And he taught us rotation. So basically, when Terry Fenwick was in possession of the football in the back 4, he couldn't pass to me because I had somebody breathing down my throat. And he just got me to change the positions with Simon Stainrod. Simon Stainrod was a striker. And he'd just get Simon to just come out and I would swap places with him. We'd rotate. And suddenly my player would come with me, my defensive player would follow me as I went into a striker's position, and Simon would come out, and the centre-half obviously didn't want to come with him, because he didn't want to go and play in midfield. So Simon suddenly became free. So Terry Fenwick could pass the ball to Simon Steinrod. I mean, I'm trying to explain it in the simplest terms I can. And I'd never seen anything like this before, you know? And it just worked. It worked all the time. It just never failed. You know, I suddenly I'm screaming for the ball from Terry Fenwick, not wanting it, obviously. And I was then going into a striking position. And then Simon would come out on like an angled run and just come into centre midfield and get the ball off Terry. And Terry would just pay it. And Simon would turn, got nobody near him whatsoever. So we'd suddenly transferred the ball from the last third into the middle third. And now Simon was in that position, in perfect position. And just silly little things like that. He just introduced on the training ground. And we practiced it on the training ground, and he taught us it on the training ground. And he would come, Terry Venables would come and take my position, you know, and just show me exactly what he wanted. And then obviously I had to go in and do it for myself. And it just worked a dream so many times at the weekend on a match day. We would just get this rotation, we'd just look at each other. And then, you know, like me and Gary Waddock would suddenly swap over and change places. Even Terry Fenwick would then come into midfield and I'd drop into the back four. Just to enable us to play out from the back, enable us to play into midfield and eventually get the ball further up the pitch. Silly little things, but Terry had thought about it, he'd given it a lot of thought, and he worked on it in the training ground. And that's just, you know, one thing. He worked on so many things like that. But it just made us all better players. And
when you joined QPR, you were 27. You hadn't played for your country at that point. No. Within 2 years of working and being coached by Terry Venables, you made your England debut. Yeah. How big a part did he play in that?
Well, huge. He said to me after, I've been here about 6 months, I think, and he called me in the office. That was something that was different. He would call you in the office. You think you might have done something wrong, but it wasn't that. It was just basically just to talk about something in your game that you could improve on, or something that he'd seen in your game that he didn't like, or something that he'd seen that he really liked. And I'd often go into his room. He'd call me in and sit me down and talk about little bits and pieces. And you know, when you did this and when you did that, did you mean whatever? And loads of different kinds of conversations, but always about football. And then he said to me, he said, "You'll play for England this year." And I looked at him. England, you know, and they're laughing. You know, I'm sort of 28 years old or whatever. And he said, "No, you'll play for England." And I said, "What makes you think that?" Like, and he said, I can just see it in you. He said, "You'd fit in the England setup, no problem." And I was like, yeah, okay. Right, mate. Anyway, I didn't play that year, but I played the year after. I got called up the year after. And I can remember going to his office because there was myself and Stevie Wicks was on the verge of the England setup. I think Bobby Robson had come to watch us play quite a few times and he quite liked Big Steve. But of course he had Terry Butcher and Russell Osman were his players at Ipswich, who were in the England squad. But he was considering it. So I went in Terry's office one night and Terry, we wanted to know whether or not I was going to, because the season was almost finished. And I think we had a tour coming up to Australia and New Zealand actually. And he wanted to know from Bobby whether or not me and Wixie were actually going to be in the England squad. And he told Terry that night, I was with Terry in the office, he told him that I was definitely in the squad and that Stevie Wixie's going to make a decision on him over the next week or so. So he put the phone down and he said, "You're in the squad, you're going to Australia." In my defence, I would say that Glenn Hodder wasn't there, Ray Wilkins wasn't there, Brian Robson wasn't there. I'm not so sure had they gone whether or not I'd have made it, but I was on the plane. I was due to go. So that was an amazing part. And he called me actually. the day I was going to make my debut, he called me, he rang me, and just wished me all the best, and he was really chuffed that I'd got into the team. So good times.
When you heard Terry Venables was leaving QPR to go to Barcelona, can you remember your thoughts and reaction?
I used to go and see Uncle Jim. I used to call Jim Gregory Uncle Jim. Clive Allen gave him that nickname. He was regarded as my Uncle Jim. I was quite close with him. And when I needed a new contract, or if there was speculation about me going anywhere, I used to go and see Terry and say to him, can I go and see the chairman? And he said, well, what do you want to see the chairman for? And I said, I need a new contract, gaffer, you know, whatever. Talked to him about a new deal and all that. He went, yeah, go and see. He didn't have a problem with it. So I went over to see Uncle Jim at the end of that season, 1984.
Yeah.
There's all this speculation about Terry going to Barcelona. And I went over to see the chairman, Uncle Jim. And I went over and sat. I was talking about a new contract, and I think Liverpool had come in for me in that week. There was speculation about me going to Liverpool, and I wanted to know if it was true and all that. And usual Jim, no, why would Liverpool want you? Sort of thing, you know? But he, and I said, what about the gaffer then? Is he going to Barcelona? And he said, listen, he won't want to go there. So I said, why is that? And he said, he won't want to eat all that foreign food. I think he might actually. So obviously eventually he went, and we were all pretty devastated. Well, we were all devastated that we'd lost him. We were delighted for him in many respects that he was going there, but at the same time, bloody hell, you know, like lost the best coach. We'd finished 5th that year. You know, it doesn't happen today. Anybody that comes up out the Championship today don't finish 5th in the Premier League the next season. We were actually 3rd, believe it or not. When we finished our last game that year, I think it was Everton away, and we finished 3rd. But there were some teams that still had matches to play. In those days, you didn't all finish on the same day. So, and they overtook us. We slipped down to 5th, which was still incredible, considering we just got promoted. We won at Arsenal that year. We beat Arsenal at home and away that year, 2-0 at home, 2-0 away. And there was speculation about Terry going to Arsenal at that particular time. And he certainly impressed them because we beat them twice that season. But no, it was an amazing season. But he finally went. We finally lost him to Barcelona, and I sat by my phone for about 2 months,
Waiting for the call.
Waiting for the call. It never happened. What's going on, Tel? Come on, mate, come and get me. But no, I actually went over. I did. I spoke to him at some stage, and he said, "Why don't you come over? Just come and watch us train for a couple of days or something." So I flew out there and spent a couple of days with them on the training ground. And I'll tell you a quick story. Alan Harris was his assistant. And Alan Harris's warm-ups in the morning, he used to do 1 to 6 every day. Every single day, his warm-up was 1 to 6. You get in 2 lines. You get the players in two lines. You've obviously got a partner. 1, you had to jump up and touch the sky. 2, you had to touch the floor. 3 to the left, 4 to the right, 5 forward and 6 backwards. And you had to learn that. And you had to do it every day. Literally every day he did that same warm-up. It was monotonous. Over and over again, every day. So he goes to Spain with Terry as his assistant. So we've all said, Harry's gone with Terry. All he needs to do is learn 1 to 6 in Spanish. And he's cracked it. Because that's all he's ever done here, 1 to 6. I swear to God, I'm watching the warm-up. He's gone, 1, 2, 3. I know, I'm in hysterics. Terry said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Oh, no. He learned 1 to 6 in Spanish. He was made." So, yeah. But no, it was just brilliant seeing it. And I can remember he had a midfield player. I can't think of his name. It could be anything. It was a long time ago, 40 years ago or more. He had a midfield player. The training session finished, and Terry said, watch him now, watch him now. And he used to go away on his own. The session was over. He'd go away on his own, and he started doing stretches. And I said, what's he doing? He said, Johnny said he does it every day. He finishes training, he goes away on his own, and he just stretches off all his muscles. And he'll do it for about 15, 20 minutes. He said he's never had one injury. Little did I know that obviously today that's just normal practice. Everybody does it. But at the time, even Terry was shocked. He said, I'll just leave him alone. He said, he's been here for how many, he was an older player, probably been there 6 or 7 years. And he said he just goes over there every day, stretches off, and he's never had one injury. He said, whatever he's doing, he said it must be good. So, yeah.
And while he was enjoying that success and big success at Barcelona, won La Liga in that first season, at QPR it was a difficult season after Terry left. More of a challenge in the top flight, and you left at the end of that season.
I left at the start of the next one. I left in November of next year.
Was life after Venables at QPR challenging and part of the reason that you decided to move?
Yeah, I mean, it was... it's like the king has gone, you know. He was the guy, the leader. He was the leader of us all. We all worshipped him. We all followed him. Whatever he said, we just did. Didn't even ask questions. Why? You often get that in football clubs, especially from senior players. When the coach says, "Run to that tree and back," you say, "Why? What good's that?" Sort of thing, you know. Under Terry, if he said, "Run to that tree and back," you say, yeah, how fast do you want me to run? You know. We just worshipped him, and we were inspired by him. Everything that he taught us, you know, and the players as well as the team that it turned us into, you know. Terry Venables got in the England squad that year. He was part of the England setup because he'd progressed as well, and we'd all become better footballers. But yeah, we were gutted when he went, and then of course Alan Mullery came in, and it was just different. It was just different. We just missed Terry and what Terry was like. And the performances were nowhere near as good as they'd been under Terry. As you know, you mentioned earlier about the UEFA Cup. We qualified for the UEFA Cup, had to play our home matches at Arsenal, at Highbury. And the famous story was when we played Partizan Belgrade and won the home leg 6-2 and lost the away leg 4-0. That was under Alan. That just wouldn't have happened with Terry, you know. It wasn't a foregone conclusion, you know, to qualify being 6-2 up from the first leg. And we lost them away goals, which was a disaster for everybody. And I think that kind of signalled the end a little bit really for Alan, I think, you know. The fans didn't accept it, nor should they. But things started to fall apart a little bit that season, and then I think Jim Smith came in that summer, the following summer. Yes, he did, because Frank Sibley looked after it for a little while. And after Alan Mullery was fired, Frank Sibley looked after the team for a little while. And then the following summer, Jim Smith joined. He didn't like me. So I left in November, went up to Derby.
As a manager, you enjoyed great success in the top flight.
Yeah.
And your paths sort of crossed with Terry Venables.
A couple of times, yeah.
Did you seek guidance from him? Did you have that relationship where you could?
Oh, without doubt. He'd always be available to, you know, having a cup of tea. I listened to Lineker the other day talking about his relationship with Terry whilst he was in Barcelona. I often used to go to lunch with Terry and just ring him and say, oh, can I come and see you or whatever, you know. We go to lunch, have a drink or whatever. So he was always readily available, I think. And he was the one really that, whilst he was at QPR, again, the usual little chat. Come and see me, son. After training, I'll pop in and see him, and he'd want to talk to me something about the team and about football. And then one morning he said to me, "What are you going to do when you finished?" I was 27, 28. And I said, "I ain't got a clue. Ain't got a clue. Go to the pub, get a pub," which most of them used to do around that time. And I said, "No, I don't know." He said, "Have you thought about coaching?" And I said, "Well, not really." I said, "Yeah, maybe I want." He said, "Well, if you're thinking about coaching," he said, "start now." I said, "What do you mean, start now?" He said, "Well, start now. Start thinking about it now. Start preparing yourself for it." He said, "Because trust me, the next couple of years are going to go like that, and suddenly you're sat there and you're going to be 31, 32, 33, whatever, and you don't know what you're going to do." He said, "Start thinking about it now." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, start making notes and things like that now, and keeping stuff and writing things down." And so I used to go home when Terry was manager of QPR. I would go home and write down the sessions that we did that day, and the day after, and the day after that. And I'd go home and draw the diagrams, put little passages of words to it. You know, we did this morning, da da da, and the object of the exercise was to do so. And I'd write stuff down and date it. And then I just, they stacked up, and I had these exercise books, and I've still got them. I've got these old exercise books, and I can go back to them. And when I went into management, I used to go back to these books and think, oh yeah, I remember doing that session 20 years ago, whatever.
Wow.
I remember that. Oh yeah, so I can nick that. So I'd transpose it onto something else and draw it all up again and take it in and use it that morning, whether I was at Villa or QPR or Derby or whatever. And I would use it as part of my training session. And it was all from what I did with Terry. So he really encouraged me to go into it. And I said to him, because at the time, to get a coaching badge, the FA badge, I mean, it wasn't really something that I wanted to do, because I'd heard that the Liverpool management team had all gone to an FA course and had walked out after 10 minutes. And they were winning Champions League and they were winning the Premier League titles in those days. Every season they were winning 3 or 4 trophies, and they all supposedly walked out. And I just thought, well, if they don't need it, I'm not going to bother. But eventually I took a course, a coaching course, and got the badges. So if anybody ever said, have you taken a course, I could say, yep, here's my badge. But it was all really down to Terry. He was one that really openly encouraged me to want to go and become a coach and think about being a coach, even whilst I was playing.
I found one match where your paths crossed.
Yeah.
There might be more than one. I was only able to find this one, Aston Villa against Middlesbrough.
Yeah, at Villa Park.
10th of February 2001.
Yeah.
Finished 1 each.
Yeah, with Steve McLaren. I think, was Terry the manager, or was he?
So Terry was the manager at Middlesbrough at the time.
Oh, okay.
Steve Stone put your Aston Villa one up. Ugo Ehiogu equalised for Middlesbrough.
From Middlesbrough? Did he? OG?
Yeah.
Was it an own goal? Or was he playing for Middlesbrough then?
I think he was playing for Middlesbrough then.
Ah, right, okay.
What was it like to go toe-to-toe with someone that you held in such high regard?
I actually had a picture of him in my dressing room, in my office. I actually had a picture of him. And I just used to look at him and smile.
In your office?
In my office at Villa.
Wow.
I just used to look at him and smile. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but sometimes I'd look at him and think, what would you do in this situation? You know, it's a bit corny. I know it's a bit corny, but it's true. What would you do in this situation? You know, certain times when I was facing a few problems, you know, I used to sort of look at him for a bit of guidance, you know. Going toe-to-toe, well, to me it was just another game. He was the enemy, you know, which for 90 minutes, I hate the opposition, you know, you hate the opposition. And he's trying to beat you. I suppose in a way I was, I think I was quite chuffed that we shared the points that day, as opposed to him beating us, you know. So It was a bit strange, and I don't know. As I said to you before, you know, often when I think of him, I smile. I always smile because you think of him, because you just think of happy times. I'd like to tell you one more story, slightly different. I might be going off the track a little bit here, but we're at QPR. We're top of the league and we're playing Wolves, who were second. And it was 2 or 3 days before Christmas. And we're playing Wolves away at Molineux. And we're all, the night of the match, say it was the 22nd of December, the night of the 22nd of December, we're all going out on the lash, the Christmas party, okay? Terry's the manager. We're all going out this Saturday night.
Does Terry know about this?
We obviously didn't think that he would know about it. We're trying to keep it as quiet as we could. But we're going out this Saturday night. We're playing Wolves away. We've gone up on the Friday night. And in those days, the team bus had a kitchen at the back. There was a curtain. Okay, there's a curtain that come across. And the kitchen was at the back, you know, microwave and all that. And we used to, Jock Skinner used to be our kit man. And he would organise all the food and cook the food for us on the way back. So we've all got our fancy dress outfits and we've all smuggled them on the bus and took them up into the kitchen and with the curtain. And Terry always used to sit down the front. And we obviously got the curtain across and all the fancy dress kits are all wrapped up in suit carriers and all that, so no one can see. So we played Wolves, who are our rivals. We're both going for the championship. We get on the bus, obviously go to Wolves. We get beat 4-0. Fucking hammered, 4-0. We get battered, 4-0. Jeez. I think Andy Gray was playing for Wolves at the time, but they battered us 4-0. So everyone's looking at the floor. As we come back to the bus, you know, we're on the bus. I don't think any of us went in the players' lounge. Straight on the bus, we just, I'm not going to speak. Don't anyone say anything. Don't anyone talk to the gaffer. The gaffer will be going mental. So you're literally looking at your feet, or you don't want to catch anybody's eye. You just sit on the bus, and we just sat there. Don't want to say a word. Gaffer's coming, so Gaffer gets on the bus, sits at the front in his normal slot, and we all just sit there. Nobody wants to put on the video or music or anything. We just sit there quiet, in silence. So we've gone for about an hour. On the way back, all of a sudden, Terry stands up and he says, "Right, who's going to put their outfit on first?" And we've all looked at each other. He said, "Come on." He said, "Game over. You can't do anything about it now. Let's get focused. The next game, we're playing so-and-so in 2 or 3 days' time or whatever. Let's get our minds on that." He said, "Right, you're all going out tonight, aren't you? Let's see. Right, who's first to put their fancy dress on?" So one by one, we had to go back behind the curtain, put on your outfit for the night, and then come out from behind the curtain, you know, with your gear on. And everybody clapped or laughed or whatever. I remember Gary Micklewhite went as Robin from Batman and Robin. You know, he had the pants on and the gloves and the mask and everything and the cape. And he come out, he got a massive round of applause and everybody clapped. And that was Terry. He was just like, you know, game's over. I know you're all going out tonight. Enjoy yourselves or whatever. That was him in many respects. And
just finally, you've described him before as the biggest influence on you as a manager, as the Pep Guardiola of 40 years ago.
Yes.
Is that the highest esteem that you held Terry Venables and continue to hold Terry Venables in? Yeah.
Yes, he was Pep Guardiola in those days. He was his innovations on the training ground. He used to do a session where he used to call it deflections. He would stand on the edge of the box, and you had to you'd have 2 or 3 strikers in the box and 2 or 3 defenders, and you'd have to hit the ball to him, and he would deflect it. You'd aim at his body, and he would hit his hand or something, because he said that's what happens on a Saturday. The ball hits somebody and bounces down to you. You need to be alive, ready to take your chance. it doesn't come to you perfectly.
Yeah, the perfect set.
You don't walk onto a ball and just smash it into the bottom corner. It doesn't happen like that in the game. It bounces up around your neck sometimes. And you've got to do something about it. This is a chance. You've got to do something about it. And we used to practice things like that on the training ground. And like shooting, when you're lining up to do, he would stand there, you'd chip the ball into him, and he had to catch it. You had to chip it in so he'd catch it. And then as you run towards him to take your shot, he'd throw it at you, because that's what happens in a match. It was always related to a realism. And he said, he'd bounce the ball at you, spin the ball at you, because very rarely does the ball just sit there for you to pass in the corner. It doesn't happen, Paul, you know.
That's not what you need to practice.
No, so we used to practice the opposite, you know, things that come up around your neck and you've got a split second to get it under control and get your shot in, you know. So all these things from him. And like I said, all his stuff was very realistic, always related to a match. And he was always very smart in things like we had reports on the opposition, a detailed report on the opposition. I'd never had that before I joined QPR. I could sit there, and even though I didn't know who played for Barnsley, I didn't really know who played, but he would have it all written out, weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses on the opposition and certain players. All his scouts were sent out with a certain itinerary to look at the opposition, to find their weakest link and all that kind of stuff. So no, mate, he was an amazing, and I was just so lucky, as many people were, that he came into our lives in a certain way. I mean, I had him for 3 seasons. Some people only have him for a couple of months, but I had him for 3 years here at QPR, and they were some amazing football times. So yeah, he's going to be missed as a person, but he'll always bring a smile to my face when I think of him.